Would you believe me if I said that this legendary Jaguar XJ220 was found lying in an Ostrich shed covered in dust and dirt? Upon its return to the UK from the Fast Masters racing series in America, the racing icon was laid to rest in the Ostrich breeding shed of Tom Wilkinshaw. But that was just the beginning. This is actually heading back to the US.
Yes.
Because it raced there, and that was in what year?
So that was 1993.
Wow.
In the Fast Masters series. I believe they were all at Indianapolis.
The equivalent then, they had what, 10 or 11 of these? And
Yes.
they all raced in a single make series.
Yeah.
And it was called the Fast Masters series. So it just sounds awesome.
Yeah. It was just, I mean, if you think back, touching on a £500,000 supercar in 1993, and they just threw 10 or 11 of them at a track and put loads of eager drivers in them. I mean, what a crazy thing.
So it was built and based on a road car.
The cars were down as race cars in the factory records. So they were, rather than a road car converted, they were actually designated for the series from new.
Okay.
But they were essentially a standard road car with a few things tweaked. This one had a full fresh paintwork. It's had, you know, knocks over the years, and it was getting tatty. So it had a full repaint, full freshen up. The decals, we actually we found an original set of Fast Masters decals in our stock.
As you do.
I think it came from one of the places in America that we, one of the Tom Wilkinshaw racing depots that we bought some parts from. Yeah. And I found in a box a load of decals, and they were actually the original Fast Masters ones. So we did remake them, but we had all the sizes were all there ready to go. So
right. So you've effectively templated these off the original sticker pack.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? And so it used to be a race car that's now been converted to a road car.
Yes, well, it's road legal. Yeah. You know, it has everything on it that a road car needs, and it will be used. It's deckled up as it was in the day, but it will be used on the road as a road car.
Brilliant. Tell me about the Ostrich shed.
Oh. Well, so rewinding back to, I think it must have been 95 or 96, we were in touch with Tom Wilkinshaw Racing, and I'm not sure how the conversation came about, but me and Don found out that there were these Fast Masters, ex-Fast Masters cars in just a shed covered in dust, and they were surplus to requirements. So we spoke to one of our clients at the time, and we did a deal to go and buy some of them. I think we ended up with 5. We collected them all, and they all had the livery on, and some of them had some parts taken off, some had damage to the panels. So we set about repairing them, and I think they got sold off one at a time. Yeah. This car included. The other 5 cars were turned into 220Ss. I believe Tom Wilkinshaw bred ostriches, and they were the cars were all in an ostrich shed with like straw around them and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. It was a weird thing, but I actually saw them in this shed, and it was you wouldn't believe it. So I can only assume that someone went into the shed, which also had old panels from the Le Mans project leaning up against the walls, and thought, wouldn't that be cool if we married the two together?
And that was what the S platform was.
And that was what the S was
from.
So they slightly upgraded the engines. I think they fitted bigger turbos to the S and a few tweaks.
So the S's were a road car platform with some Le Mans inspired body panels on them.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow.
So
brilliant.
I did have grey interior.
Yeah.
I decided to just strip most of it out, and what was left doing black interior with just the Recaro seats as they come. We did the dashboard in Alcantara. Just with a sort of sporty feel in mind.
Yeah, that is pure. That looks
serious,
it's
just
man.
No carpets, and it was done practically just because it was going to be a track car, really. So it's got the harnesses and the race seats.
Yeah. Do you want to touch on the tyre story? Because I think it's quite a significant reason why this car can still exist.
Yeah, so this was a few years ago now. We basically ran out of tyres. There were no tyres left. We'd managed to buy some old stock of the original tyre, but obviously they were at the time 25 years old. But that was all we got at the time. So we eventually ran out of the tyres completely. Now, mainly due to drive-by noise, we couldn't just rebuild. We couldn't just make some more of the original spec tyre. But we were out in Rome for several weeks on end. We left. This car actually was one of the cars that we used to develop the new tyre.
So this chassis's got all sorts of stories on it.
It's got some history, this one, yeah. So 2 cars were in Rome for several weeks, and I drove them both, put them through the paces on various tracks that they've got out there.
So you have effectively developed your own tyre and your own compound specifically for the XJ220.
Absolutely.
And in turn, that's been able to keep the platform going.
Yeah,
really,
I mean,
right?
you know, at the time we had clients with cars that wouldn't pass an MOT with illegal tyres, and we didn't have an answer, so we had to do something about it. I was saying earlier on, we designed this this little tick on the edge of the tyre.
And you adapted the outer edge tread blocks.
Yes, I didn't want this cut going all the way over the edge of the tyre.
Fancy that, being able to develop your own tyre. That would be bloody brilliant. Okay, so here we are. I always find one of the most surprising character traits of the XJ220 is actually how it shrinks around you once you start driving it. What I mean by that is, this car is over 16 feet long. You heard that right, 16 feet. It's like a 1.5 foot longer than a Porsche 959 or, you know, something of a similar era. But this thing is a different animal in terms of size and scale. But once you get rolling, the way it shrinks around you, dare I say it, it's quite a friendly, approachable car. Now, obviously, this car has just been heavily restored. As we've just heard from Justin, it's got a fantastic story and it's been sold, so it's gone to a new owner. So we're not going to be ragging this thing this afternoon, but it's just awesome to finish this video with a drive and just conveying to you really the things that you can't Google. That for me is the more interesting stuff. We've heard the top line figures around how this car came to be and what its platform is, but when you're in it, I think it's got to be one of the most unique cars to drive. One, because of its size, but I think one of the more intangible characteristics of an XJ220 is its legend and what an icon it is. And I think that, psychologically, the way it makes you feel walking over to it and approaching it and now driving it, this is the like British Ferrari F40 slayer. Like, this thing would nail an F40, certainly in a straight line. And one well set up. I mean, these things, as we've just seen parked in the background, these things raced at Le Mans. These platforms are no joke. And what's fantastic about this car, it is the same chassis. It is pretty much the same setup from when it used to race back in the Fast Master Series all of those years ago. The only differences back then were subtle tweaks and upgrades from the standard road car, perhaps stiffer bushings. Justin touched on there might be stiffer valve springs, but overall it is the road going car that we're driving right now that used to be that iconic race car. And for that to be the case, this thing is a true racing road legal icon. Justin and Don Law, they have acquired so much history and so much heritage and so much learning about what the XJ220 is and all of its heritage, that they're able to add in those significant nuanced details like the sticker pack. I mean, who just so happens to have an original sticker pack for a racing XJ220 that raced in America hanging around in the garage? These guys do. Oh, listen to that. You ready? Wow. You know, one of the defining words of this car is torque. The amount of torque. There's subtle turbo lag, not much, but by God, when it comes on cam, there's like a malleable ball of energy underneath your right foot of just thick, available torque. It's a cool feeling. I mean, one of the things that might surprise you is actually how approachable this thing is. Like when you approach it, when you see it, because I mean, it's a big car. It's a big boy car, this. And there's plenty of power, and there's not a lot in the way of driver assistance. But it's actually quite approachable because it's got such a long wheelbase. Today, obviously, we're not driving it fast, but I've driven Justin's LM on track, and these guys have been kind enough to let me drive other XJ220s. And when they're up to speed, because of that long wheelbase, the stability is incredible. And all of a sudden, all of that iconic legend of it being an old supercar which can bite you in the arse, don't get me wrong, you got to be careful. But it kind of smooths away. It's quite a flattering car, which for something that's so raw and so pure is actually unexpected. Another defining word after torque is solid. Now, as Justin touched on, this has been built for the customer to use as a track day car. I've got to meet this customer. What a legend. But the way it's being built, all of a sudden you can feel the undertones of the sort of racing pedigree which is inherent in it. Now, if you go for a standard road car, they almost feel like a sort of hyper GT, a hyper Grand Tourer. The way this thing is being set up, even the way the interior feels, it's a bit more stripped back. There's lots of Alcantara, and just the way it feels is fantastic. What I really love is the actuation of this gearbox. It's so snick-snack. Oh, and then the way the torque pulls. I mean, to be truthful, you need a lot of empty road in order to make the most of this thing. The steering as well, we forget driving new cars, which is what I share the majority of the time on this channel. We forget just how much sort of weight and dexterity and feedback and feel that has been lost through the EPAS, the electronic steering systems which are now on new supercars. These old school things, they are pure analog. That's something that's hard to convey, and the importance of how the weight of a clutch feels compared to the weight of the steering and the throw of the box. These are the three sort of primary instruments that you engage with as a driver. And if any one of these things is mismatched in the way it's weighted, if that clutch was too light, if this throw wasn't notchy and heavy enough and it felt a bit hollow, it all just wouldn't synchronize. But all of this, it feels a really cohesive driving unit, and you gel with it instantaneously. Everything's so instinctful. But when this thing really comes into its own is when it can get some speed up it. As I mentioned, it's a big car, it likes to find its plane, and there's this window of torque that when that turbo's spooling, it almost sails with this massive punch of energy. It's not particularly high revving, but it's not the revs you're relying on in this car. It's all about that heavy turbo torque. And seriously, when it comes on, it comes on. This is up there in a lineup with an F40, Lamborghini Diablo. This is real sort of retro folklore stuff, and that definitely has a psychological impact on you when you walk over to it. Like before you even step in this thing, like it's nice just talking about it down the pub or XJ220. Someone passes you the keys to one, it's like saying, here you go, take this road-going fighter jet, go and drive it. And that has an impact on you. The way you feel is an equal mix of feeling like a rock star and mildly terrified. These guys are the global authority on XJ220s, and I've seen builds from these guys that are opposite ends of the spectrum. You can have something like this, or Justin's 220 LM, which is like full-on race car, or you can have an authentic, traditionally restored XJ220, which, as I mentioned earlier, is like this sort of hyper Grand Tourer, super plush inside, and the character that you can get out of effectively the same chassis, the same car, but totally different experiences. This is a real sweet spot. It's got that lean towards a driver's car, but it's equally very usable on the road. And what that means is you can drive it to a track day. Providing you don't go through a full set of tires, you can drive it home again. And that's pretty cool for this 90s racing icon. What a machine. And all of this, let's not forget, it wasn't that long ago that this car was discovered in an ostrich shed covered in crap.